Have you ever wanted to hike Machu Picchu? Today's guest did too. Despite having a physical disability that required her to walk on crutches. Driven by a burning desire to push her limits, Michelle traveled to Peru, and she hiked 26 grueling miles along the Inca Trail and conquered her goal of reaching the breathtaking ancient citadel of Machu Picchu. Now, as a certified coach and host of the Make It Visible podcast, Michelle is on a mission to empower women worldwide to have the courage to show up fully as themselves. In this interview, she shares her incredible journey of inner transformation that gave her the strength to literally move mountains, or at least move up mountains, as well as tactical tips for using storytelling and podcasting to attract your dream clients. Hello, incurable creators. I'm excited to bring you some bonus episodes featuring exclusive interviews from the 2023 PodUp Virtual Podcasting Summit. Each Thursday for months, you're going to hear interviews from a diverse range of podcasting and marketing experts. My hope is these repurposed interviews will inspire you with new ideas and insights to take your podcast to the next level. And of course, remember to listen every Tuesday for our regular episodes of Podcasting Secrets as well. Now, let's dive into today's bonus interview from PodUp's 2013 Podcasting Summit. Hello, I'm Nathan Gwilliam, the CEO of PodUp and your host for the Podcasting Summit. Thank you for joining us for this interview with Michelle Kuei. Michelle is the founder of Elevate Life Coaching. She's also the host of the Make It Visible podcast. Michelle has a really interesting bio. She's a certified visibility and marketing coach. She's a certified storytelling master, and she's an author. She has an online course called Attract Clients Through Storytelling. And in her Elevate Life Coaching business, she mentors women how to use the power of storytelling to attract clients and turn their passion for coaching into a profitable business. Thank you so much for joining us in this interview, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, can you start off by sharing with us your story, your journey in podcasting and storytelling?
Yeah, so it goes way back in 2016 when I decided, life was too boring. So just to give you a little backstory, I am physically disabled and I walk with crutches. So I woke up one day and I said, today is a good day to change. So I booked myself a ticket, flew myself to Peru and hiked through 26 miles of Machu Picchu on the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu.
Wow.
And when I came home, I was totally inspired. I've been a clinical pharmacist for the longest time. And thanks to my parents who put me through the school education, but it wasn't where I needed to be, and it wasn't bringing me a lot of happiness. So I came home. I was very inspired. I did that. I show up and power through, hike through the Inca Trail, and I was looking for ways to spread my message and to empower more people. I want to be that inspiration for more people. And so I decided to enroll myself into a coaching program, got myself certified, became a professional coach. And I was working as a life and mindset coach initially. And that was my whole intention behind starting a podcast. I want to have a platform where it belongs to me and I own it, where I have the freedom of expressing whatever that I feel that I can express on podcasts. So that was my initial journey of starting a podcast. I want a platform where I can freely express what I believe, who I am, and what my message is about to empower more women to show up courageously and confidently, believing that they can do things and we can do it with and without fear. That's my journey. And that got me started on podcasts. And the rest is pretty much history, which we're going to tell the audience more about.
Yeah, so why didn't you keep going? You got started, and then what?
And then, so the podcast continue, and my whole journey continue as life and mindset coach. But I realized that there was a lot of coaches out there who keep coming back to me and saying, Michelle, I love your content. I love all the stuff that you're posting on social media. How do you do it? So I noticed that more and more people came to me and wanting to know how I created this publicity, visibility, and how did I market myself as a life and mindset coach while they're sitting at home and wondering, where can I market myself? So I noticed it became a skill that I had that I didn't know I had. And just being able to connect with people, talking to people, everyday conversation. And so I noticed that that started to change. And right before COVID, I remember that was the time I started to pivot. I noticed more and more coaches were struggling the fact that they couldn't get more clients and they're struggling in their business. So I said, well, why not? Why not share what I know with them? And so initially it was just a test round. It was just really validating my skills as a marketing coach, as a visibility coach. And I noticed that it was getting traction and more coaches that I was able to help, they're also growing their audience. I remember there's one of my students, she never had a podcast before. And I said, well, you love being on video, you love talking. Why don't you start a podcast for yourself? And so she went ahead and she decided, okay, so I'm going to start a YouTube channel and I'm going to start doing video. And that same month, in 30 days, she was able to grow her audience from 700 or 800 on her Instagram and to over 1,000 followers on Instagram. I'm like, holy shoot, this actually worked. And so it was a great news for me because not only do I feel confident about helping others, growing their audience and building their visibility, and they actually feel confident in sharing their message to the rest of the world. So it's like a win-win situation for everybody. And that's when I pivoted.
Tell us about some successes you've had along this journey with your show and with your coaching. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I think what I have done over the half a decade in coaching business was that I was able to grow my own audience. I noticed that, when I go out there and just being me and just telling my story of how I hiked Machu Picchu, how I conquer my fear and being brave, there's more and more people starting to notice that, oh, Michelle is doing some amazing thing. Let me go and follow her. And it was very unintentional. It was almost like, I'm just showing up and telling my story. I'm going to tell you a story of how I hiked Machu Picchu. I'm going to tell you a story of how I got sick. I got stomach flu 2 days before I went to the hike. And I almost thought I was going to die in Peru. But then, I told the doctor, you got to release me. And here I am, I'm hiking. And so I kept telling these type of story. And it was just so relatable in terms of every day. This is how we feel about a lot of things that we encounter in life. And people resonate with them. And so growing my audience became so easy for me.
People are inspired by people who tell stories of the challenges they overcame, right? So often we think we have to convey in our show this perfect life where there's no problems. And I think those people are missing something huge because our audience, none of us have perfect lives, right? We all have challenges. And honestly, overcoming those challenges is how we achieve the greatness in our lives. So number one, thank you for sharing your challenge. Can you tell us a little bit more, secondly, about how your challenges have either helped you do better in your podcast or how you've overcome your challenges to succeed with your show and your coaching business?
Yeah, so I think initially where I was struggling with the podcast was I wasn't sure what to talk about. I know a lot of podcasters, well, now more seasoned. I know that when you start a podcast, you might want to think about the theme that you want to express. You might want to think about the topic that you're passionate about. But initially, when I first started out, I didn't have a topic that I was passionate about. So I was basically sharing the stories of how I was struggling as someone with physical disabilities. And there was a lot of judgment. So a lot of it has to do with my personal experiences. And one of the biggest episode, and the episode is still being listened and downloaded multiple times. And I keep looking at the number. It's like growing ridiculously. It's the episode on how I was seeking external validation. And that external validation was the fact that, I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to be acknowledged that, hey, I may look different, but deep down inside, I'm just a normal human being. And I want to be loved. I want to be heard. And so that episode got the most download out of my surprise because there's nothing that was planned, was scripted. And what really made it resonated to a lot of people, I believe, is the fact that we all seek outside validation and approval and just people recognizing our achievements or just people recognizing our existence. And that was the episode that I'm most proud of. I don't necessarily say that I was able to get clients out of it, but it has the most download. So I kept going back to that episode and thinking, what have I said in that episode that resonated with so many people? And it was the fact that we all want to be perfectly normal. And my book is perfectly normal. So when I first started out my podcast, it was called It's Perfectly Normal. It's a podcast about where I share inspiration of courage, authenticity, and connection. That was my 3 biggest value. And that's how I started my podcast. It was called Perfectly Normal because I thought that would be a great way to market my book because it's the same name as a book.
So is your secret sauce for connecting with your audience that you are willing to be vulnerable and share your challenges and the adversity that you go through? Does that seem to be what's working best for you?
I think that my secret sauce is empathy. Empathy is something so powerful, something that, I think it brings out a lot of the intention behind a podcast host and also their audience. I think when we tune into a podcast episode, what we're seeking is being understood. And I think that was what I was struggling the most, is being understood. So when I listen to a podcast, I want to know, does a host understand what I'm going through? And that host does, then, you bet I'm going to come back and listen to it more. And I think it's about the relatability. It's also about the empathy that person have to the audience themselves. So when I hear in an episode, I'm looking for elements like, are you saying things because you want my money or you want to get more client, or are you saying things because you truly understand what I'm going through, what I'm struggling with? And are you giving me some really tangible solution and advices on how can I be better without wanting to turn me into clients or anything like that? Because I think nowadays the listeners are getting smarter and smarter, right? So it's the intention behind what we share that's going to impact whether or not we show up as a host with the empathy that we need to connect with our audience. So I think that is really my secret sauce of connecting with the audience.
How do you show that empathy? How do you convey that empathy effectively as a podcaster?
I think from conversation. So a lot of time it would be me talking, and it could be a solo. I do a combination of solo shows, and also I invite guests. And through my conversation, a lot of time I just talk about the struggle I'm having. If I'm having a really bad and icky day, then I'm going to tell my audience, hey, you may hear a lot more filler words in this episode because this is what I'm feeling. And I'm sure, there's times where you feel the same as well. And so just bear with me. It's not going to be perfect. I don't do a whole lot of editing. So if you need to turn it out, turn it off, please do. But I am here to help you, to support you, because I know we all have those one of those bad days.
What tips and advice can you give us about keeping an audience engaged and wanting to come back for more?
So I think the most important, and this is probably for someone who's starting new with a podcast, is that you do want to have an intention behind the episode that you're producing. And you almost want to treat it as this is your baby, right? You're putting something out to the world. So what do you want your audience to feel? And I think the emotion needs to be there and the intention needs to be there. So number one is, do you have an intention behind your episode? What do you want this episode to do for your audience? That's the most important thing. And that is going to change the energy of how we design the episode. I also feel that this is something I wish I had, is some structure in terms of where is the conversation going. Am I just going to turn on the camera and start rambling about something? Or do I have actually taken my audience to a learning point or a lesson behind what I'm sharing? So what is the lesson I need to learn here? And I think that's also important. So that's tip number 2. Have an intention, have a lesson behind what you're sharing. And then thirdly is that you want to make sure that you always have a call to action. And I think a lot of podcast hosts, or even including myself when I first started out, I always forget having a call to action, whether it's inspiring someone, hey, do one thing today that's going to change your life. That's a call to action. Or if you have a business, then you might want to share your lead magnet. You might want to send people to extra resources. Like, what do you want people to do after listening? And I think that is very important. Otherwise, why bother listening to a podcast, right? I'm spending 20 minutes or 30 minutes sitting down and listening to a podcast. I want to learn something. So what is it that you want me to do after listening?
What advice do you have for new podcasters just getting started?
Don't be afraid. Just get started. You don't have to be perfect. And I think we often get caught in that inner critic sometimes. And we think that, oh my gosh, I want my podcast to be on the top of the chart. So I'm going to do everything possible to make it to the top of the chart. But we forget that there's actually passion behind what you do and why you're doing it. And so don't look for perfection. Look for your passion. Like, why are you doing it? If you're not happy about doing it, don't do it. And so just do it with or without fear. Be courageous. And perfect is there's a saying that goes, imperfection is the new perfect.
What mistakes do new podcasters make that you would advise them to avoid?
Having too many topics. And I see this all the time. Is that the podcast that wants to grow and having a consistent flow. If you're a business owner, you want a consistent flow of audience or keep scaling and growing, then it's really important to have a really streamlined key topic that you want to focus on. So you can't be just talking about, today we're going to talk about motivation. Tomorrow we're going to talk about a different topic. You're creating a lot of confusion for your audience. So having a narrow and specific topic that you want to focus on. And again, I think you go back to why you do what you do, right? Because you have a passion. So what is it that you're passionate about? And talk about that passion that you have. And it may not be related to your business, but that's okay because your energy is going to attract the people who want to be in your space. And that energy is just so attractive and it's just so irresistible.
What is the best advice you could give to other podcasters about how they can create a show that their audience will love?
Really, really understand your audience. You really need to study them, be with them, create that community where you can hold everybody together. Because that connection between one human being to another human being through a platform, it's so powerful. It's not just a podcast. It's not just an episode that you're creating. You're creating a bond. You're creating a bridge. And because you believe what you believe, having a podcast is such an amazing vehicle where you can bring people together. And I'm a huge believer that, we need more people who are able to build that bridges and build that bond so that we can create the world that we ever dream of. I call me naive or call me idealist, but I do believe that we need to have a world where everybody come together and we're all connected, no matter where we come from, what culture or what language we speak. Having a vehicle like this without boundary, without limitation, it's just such a beautiful way of expressing, sharing. So understand your people and be in your community and truly, truly, truly get to know your audience. It's not just a whole bunch of numbers that we're striving after. It's actually one person who's listening to your show right now. And your show is going to change that one person's life. Not 3,000, not 4,000, not 5,000. You're changing one person's life, one episode at a time.
Okay, so you just shared with us some ideas for people to love your podcast. What are some mistakes that podcasters often make so people don't quite love our shows? What do we need to avoid?
Too salesy. I think I've heard podcasts and episodes where they're all about promoting, right? And there's nothing wrong. Perhaps their theme is just all marketing and promoting. But I think when a podcast show that has too many, I did this and I did that, there's too much ego behind the podcast that very quickly tune people out. And I also think that, having the proper equipment and you are at a place where there's not a whole lot of noise, that would also help. And also learn to public speak. And I'm personally a Toastmasters. So one of the things that we strive for is making sure that we don't use a lot of filler words, because I've heard episodes where we use a lot of filler words, and that's a big turnoff as well. So just some of the quick tips that I've observed through my podcast.
In our pre-interview conversation, we were talking about introvert podcasters, and you were sharing with me how many of your clients are introverts, and I've seen that a lot. Some of the great podcasters are introverts. Can you talk a little bit more about why do you think you see so many introverts turning to podcasting, and how maybe they can leverage a superpower in doing so?
I think a lot of introverts are, we like the space to ourselves. So we strive in a quiet place where we're not really among with a whole lot of people. And podcast is something that's it can be so private if you do it at home. You're not bothered by anyone. You close your door. No one knows that you're recording your podcast episode. Or it could be in the public, right? I've been to podcasts where I'm being interviewed in a live setting. And so there's so many different options and variety of how you can record and produce a podcast. It makes introvert feel at ease because I don't need to necessarily be on a video. Like right now we're on video, but technically we don't need to be on a video if I choose not to. And so podcasts give you that alternative options of how I can reserve my energy, feel safe, and feel confident that I don't have to expose myself so much. And that takes away the pressure of public speaking. And so, and not just podcasts has a lot of introvert. I feel like there's a lot of entrepreneurs are also introvert. There's a lot of great entrepreneurs I know, they're introverts.
You are a coach who is also a podcaster. How has your podcasting helped your coaching business, and how has your coaching business helped your podcast?
I think it's creating a channel where I can establish my authority. So podcast is definitely a place where I can teach. I can tell people what I believe. I can use it as a teaching platform, as a webinar platform. There's so many options for me to establish that credibility and authority through each episode that I produce, and which will then help me to create that publicity every time I share in an episode. And so how I typically share is I will share in a blog post, I will share it on multi different social media platform. And when people read it, they're not only just reading my knowledge, they're also reading my name, they're reading my episode, my podcast places and where they can find more information. So it creates that reputation and in building your personal brand. So it's definitely a plus one or plus 10 to your business by creating that credibility, authority, and people will get to know you, spread the message out, especially nowadays because people are turned off by marketers who like really sending these spammy messages. So having a podcast is great because you're sharing resource rather than sharing marketing material. So there's a difference between the two. And so that definitely had helped me grab more lead. And I also use so anywhere I can, I would inject my my lead magnet. So it also helped me to capture a lot of lead just on social media, where I can't do that in anywhere else. So definitely had helped me got a lot of client that way. And also the reverse is happening, right? Because my clients are looking for platform to learn. So it helped my podcast to grow as well. So I think it works both ways, win-win.
Okay, you are a certified master storyteller. That's a pretty cool title. I would love to have that title. You'd be a fun person to hang around with at a party, I assume. Can you tell me the role and the power of storytelling in podcasting, and maybe give some tips and advice for us to be better storytellers in our podcasts?
I think the biggest tip I share all the time is that you need to have a story bank. A lot of us, we have a lot of things that's happening in our life, things that people that we encounter, maybe even at a coffee shop. And sometimes we just forget that they need to be recorded. And that becomes your story that you can tell on your podcast episode. Like this morning, I was grabbing a cup of coffee and I came across this lady who was standing in front of the counter and she was occupying the whole entire space. So there's some little tiny pieces that's happening in our life that are great things to share on your podcast episode that is going to get your audience listen and be engaged and feel like interested. Okay, so what is she going to talk more about next? So it becomes very unpredictable when you start injecting those stories. So the first thing I would recommend for anybody who's doing podcasts, or even if you're not doing podcasts, you're just doing your blog post or anything like that, tell story. And when you go to party, people want to hear story. Like we're just so bound and attracted to story. So definitely keep a story bank. That's what I call it.
All right. Tell us one or two of the best stories in your story bank.
Hell, I have so many, but I will share one of the most recent one. So I was on a flight to, I was on a flight to Florida. It was going to Tampa for a speaking engagement, and there was our plane got delayed, and lo and behold, there was someone who's on the street, and he decided to show up in the middle of the road, blocking the airplane, and we could not figure out why he blocked the airplane. And so the whole entire plane of 200 people sitting on the plane, waiting for the plane to take off, and the captain decided to pick up the announcement, and he is the most animated captain ever. And I really wish that he has a podcast episode where he would consider to have one, because it was just so entertaining and so hilarious. So that's one of the stories that we share, that if your episode is not picking up, think about bringing some story, because people appreciate humility.
We talked in the pre-interview about value exchanges, how one of the best reasons for having a podcast is it kind of gives you currency or value that you could exchange to get other things you want. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think in the past, at least when I first started out, I was told that, hey, Michelle, you need to publish a book, because a book will establish your credibility, it will establish your authority. But if you're looking at the modern world, nowadays, everybody has a cell phone, and it's always convenient to put in their pocket. So your currency becomes, instead of having a book where people have to carry around, your currency becomes something that is portable. And what would be portable? Your podcast. So I can easily go up to someone and say, hey, I have a podcast. Do you have one? That's doing an exchange and start collaborate, because your audience can probably benefit from listening to my story, and my audience can probably benefit from listening to your story. So it becomes an exchange of values where we can have that shared audience, right? Or borrowing someone's audience, and that would also build our visibility, that would build our credibility. And it's also a great way to demonstrate and showcase your own authority. Because you have a podcast, obviously, you probably know something, right? Or maybe not obvious, but when you start listening, you'll find out. So it's a great way to build your reputation, your brand visibility, your brand personality also. So it's just a great way to exchange that values.
Michelle, if our audience has enjoyed what they've heard from you and they want to learn more about your services, what are the best ways for them to do that?
I think the best way, and I actually brought presents for everybody, because I do believe that everybody can use a little bit of visibility nowadays, especially if you have a business, you're trying to grow it, you're trying to build the audience. It definitely helps to have and understand what your message is and how do you share with your audience. So I actually brought a gift. They're going to get a PDF download, and in that download, what they're going to learn are 3 steps. So this is where I help people to get seen, get heard, and get clients. So I help them map out their messages. I help them to create and know which platform to position your story on. So for example, if you really like podcasting, then podcast would be one of the platforms that you go and share your message so that you can build that authority and income. So I have all the exercise mapped out in that PDF when they download.
And for our audience that is listening or watching to this episode, I encourage you to click on the button below where you can explore the VIP upgrade package for the summit. It's completely free, and you can get things like a free 30-day trial of PodUp, access to a free 7-day How to Launch a Podcast challenge, and other cool bonuses just by clicking on that button below. Thank you so much, and we wish you success as you strive to create a podcast that your audience will love. Here are my key takeaways from this episode. Number 1, Michelle was inspired to push her limits and hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu despite having a physical disability. This experience taught her the power of showing up courageously. Number 2, after seeing that other coaches were struggling to attract clients, Michelle realized she had a skill for marketing and visibility. She started teaching what she knew. Number 3, Michelle believes the secret sauce for connecting with your audience is empathy and understanding what they're going through. Number 4, having an intention behind each episode and a clear lesson for your listeners helps keep people engaged and coming back. Number 5, don't be afraid to just get started podcasting. Passion is more important than perfection. That is so true. Number 6, have a clear, specific topic to focus on rather than covering too many random topics. Number 7, storytelling helps make your show relatable and compelling. Keep a story bank of interesting anecdotes. And finally, number 8, podcasting builds authority and gives you something valuable to exchange to promote your business. If you're looking for a great all-in-one podcasting platform that's going to make your podcasting work so much easier, I recommend you check out PodUp. It has more than 35 integrated modules that can help you create, grow, and monetize your business around a podcast. You can even get a free trial at podup.com. Thanks for joining us for this episode. I wish you success as you unlock your inner strength to become an amazing podcast host. Editor going back. I wish you success as you unlock your inner strength to become an amazing podcast host.